Good, good morning. Welcome to Science Saturday. We have a fantastic presentation on fossils today. My name is Kenny with TPPA, and you might notice why Kitty's not here. We're trying something new, make it a bit more exciting, and we're going to be rotating hosts. I don't know who's the next host going to be, but that's going to be a surprise. Today, I want to allow our presenter to introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Dr. Greg Brzezinski. I'm a biology professor here at the University of the Virgin Islands, the Albert Sheen campus on St. Croix. Dr. B is great. Since I have a long Polish name, I know your jaw gets tired saying it a lot. Dr. B, Greg, whatever. So my research focus is in paleontology, and coming here to the Virgin Islands and St. Croix in particular, I've been interested in not only finding fossil reefs and fossil reef communities on the island, but also how can we use those past fossil reefs to help inform conservation efforts on modern reefs offshore.
That's amazing. So coral reefs, fossils, just to start off, what exactly is a fossil and how does it form throughout the years?
Okay, fossil is sort of it has sort of a broad definition. A lot of times people think of something like a dinosaur bone where it's been turned from one mineral into another, which is a type of fossil, but some fossils are just seashells that have been buried for a very long time. Some are even have bits of organ. If you've ever heard of mammoths being frozen in Siberia and being excavated, those are fossils too. A fossil really is just the buried remains of one's living organism. We have the two main types. We have body fossils, which are like the animal itself. It's like its organs or an impression of it. It's skeleton usually, either the internal skeleton of a vertebrate or like the shell of a mollusk or something like that. And then we have trace fossils where it's left behind behavior of the animal. So like you hear about dinosaur footprints get found in a place, that's a trace fossil. A lot of times we have like burrows, like for marine creatures that are preserved as well. So those are the two main kind. A body fossil forms, generally speaking, if after an organism dies, before it completely decomposes, it gets buried in sediment, and that sediment buries it such that no oxygen can get to it, and that sort of keeps the decomposers away. So over time, it just sort of becomes part of that rock surrounding it, and over hundreds of thousands to millions, even billions of years, eventually that rock gets lifted up, the top layers get eroded down, and then we see the fossils themselves that we can study.
So I know you have a fossil available for us today. Do you mind sort of walking through it and how you know how old it is?
Sure, yeah. So this fossil right here is from St. Croix, actually. It's a carbonate sedimentary rock. You can see the rock that's around it too. It's very common in the middle of the island, sort of the area between the two mountains. And you can see fossils here. We have a fossil snail and a part of a clamshell and what might be a bit of coral right here. I'm not entirely sure, but you can see it's very, very heavily what we call eroded. So eroded means like broken down by the weather, and then weathered means moved somewhere. Do I have that in the right order? Yeah, weathering means being broken down by the weather, hence the name, and eroded means getting moved. So these have been very heavily weathered. They may have been eroded as well. But yeah, we find these types of fossils in the middle of the island and the east and west ends. We find more older fossils that can be often deeper water, and so you get, again, corals and mollusks and things like that. But other groups like we'll talk about later, like ammonites.
And based on age, how old do you think this fossil may be?
Everything from the middle is from time periods we call the Miocene and Pliocene, so probably I'm going to say maxes out 20 million years ago.
20 million years.
Yeah, so
Wow.
these would have been, so St. Croix is thought to have originally formed from the mountains on either end, so up near Frederiksted and out on the east end used to be individual islands with a large sort of coral reef in between, and over time, because the Caribbean is a very tectonically active area where two plates are colliding, there's a lot of things get pushed up and forced down and all around, and this reef that was in between the two got pushed up to become the dry land we know today.
Wow.
So with these, particularly on St. Croix, I think it's more to do, we can tell how old these are. A lot of times we have what are called index fossils, which are fossils of a certain organism that lives at a particular time. So you know, if I see this fossil of this species here, I know it's in about this time. Other ways we can indirectly date this is what's called radiometric dating. So if we have a radioactive element, they over time are, they're unstable, so over time they'll switch from one form to another, like uranium to lead, and you can measure the rate at which it does that. So if you can look at a rock and see the proportion of uranium to lead, knowing that number, you can know how old it is. Now, that only works really for what we call igneous rocks, which are rocks that are made from lava or magma. So with this, which is a sedimentary rock, which is made of broken up pieces of rock that are glued together and compressed, we have to find an igneous rock close by, ideally above and below, but wherever we can find it and make an approximation. But for here, my understanding is that mostly we use whatever fossils we see and say, okay, this critter lived at this age, so it probably is this age.
That's amazing. 20 million years.
Up to. I don't want to make any promises I can't keep.
Still just really.
Yeah, I forget millions of years is a big thing sometimes. I just throw that word around.
I just have a question. Where do you even start to look? We're on the island, and how do you know to look at this east end or west end or even the middle?
Good question. So there's a lot of different ways that it's done, and I do not want to downplay the role of dumb luck in finding things, like, because we think about paleontologists going out into the middle of the Badlands or the middle of like arid regions of South Africa or something like that, and you know, these long expeditions. Sometimes you just find if there's a bit of rock on the side of the road on a highway, you pull over and you look at it and you can find things. I had a friend who in grad school who she had to have her husband drive whenever they went through road cuts because she would almost get them in accidents looking at the rocks on his face. So other than that though, we a lot of times if we know what types of rocks are in an area, if we also know, you know, what types of rocks are good for preserving fossils, then we know, hey, let's go look in this area, we might find something. Sometimes we'll find fossils in rock formation in this area, and if we know that that same rock formation is also in this area, then we can say, oh, let's go look here, and maybe they'll have the same fossils. So that's sort of a lot of what at least I'm trying to do now, is go to places on St. Croix where we have rocks we know contain fossils in places and see, you know, what we can find now.
Yeah, and I see you have a map up for us. Can you kind of describe what we're seeing here?
So let me scroll in a little bit. So this is a geologic map of St. Croix. So you see here, it's all kinds of pretty colors and pretty shapes. Now each of these colors correspond to what we call a formation. A formation is a unit of rock that all shares like the sort of same characteristics. and we can often, determine the age for these. So in St. Croix, the oldest ones we have are like here in the northwest and here out on the east end, which are Cretaceous sedimentary rocks, which we find fossil coral, fossil mollusks, so like these kinds of things. Again, and then in the middle you see sort of these purple-ish, sort of tan-ish rocks that are, again, more like these here that would be, much more recent. And then you see the middle here, this QAL, this tan buff color. That's sort of just modern sediments that have washed down from the hills and mountains surrounding. So this, we use something like this, scientific publications to help us find where are good places on the ground to go and look for fossil outcrops.
From just past studies, which areas have you found the most sort of fossils to come to the state?
So we, if we look here, so keeping in mind the northwest corner, we have this paper here. It's actually a bit older, and by a bit older, I mean when I was a kid, so like back in the Paleozoic. So what we see here, they're finding rocks of Ham's Bluff, Bats, Butler Bay, Spratt, Mahogany, and within the city of Frederickstead itself. And we see here, we can look, they actually do, with these they do what's called core. So they take a big long tube of metal and they drive it down in the earth and cap it off the top, like if you put a straw into soda and put your thumb on the top, you can pull it out and get the soda. You can do that with rocks too, just, a much more awesome straw. So they did that in a lot of places, but here they did it on the west end, and you can see when they got the core, you can see like here's a piece of fossil. These are very large single-celled organisms called forams. These are parts of like bivalve shells, that is things like clams and mussels and oysters. And these, again, are more sort of forams. This is a piece of solitary coral. We go further down here, some other fossil types we see are, keep going. We find, again, the fossil corals themselves as well, including reef fossils and solitary coral. So these are the kinds of fossils we found so far in St. Croix, and there's also been a type that, I think I mentioned this already, but an ammonite, which is like a spiral shell relative of squid and octopus, and I absolutely love them. I'm so hoping to find some more. But speaking of that, if you don't mind me taking over for the combo for a second, I did want to mention that you don't really think about it, but the Caribbean in general has a very rich fossil legacy, I guess, for lack of a better word. But if we look at some of the, like in the Greater Antilles, more area to preserve fossils, what we see in Jamaica, we find fossil crocodilians. And in fact, what's interesting about this guy was, this is sort of the last refuge for them. Their ancestors had gone extinct in South America, and so these were sort of the last ones left, and they were found in Jamaica. And in fact, it was thought that there were never big carnivores on any Caribbean islands until they found this guy. We see sirenians, which are relatives of manatees here. So these are like their early ancestors that still had all their legs. Perissodactyl, so that's things like horses and deer, and even, I could be wrong, but leaf-eating mammals. So we find these in Jamaica. In Cuba, oh boy. Cuba is rich, but Cuba may have actually been part of when North America and South America linked up and a bunch of critters started going between them. Cuba may have actually been part of that land bridge. So we find plants, we find my beloved ammonites here. So supposedly we might find something like this on St. Croix, and I'm really hoping so. Echinoderms, like this here, would be a fossil sea urchin. Spine's long gone, but it's kind of to be expected. A lot of different fish. For all you dinosaur and reptiles that lived at the same time as dinosaur fans, we have plesiosaurs, we have ichthyosaurs, we have ancient crocodiles, we have pterosaurs like this guy here. We have dinosaurs, including an unidentified species of chimerosaurs, which is a type of sauropod, you know, the long neck, long tail, all that. And then we have Ciconia, which this is where I'm getting very pedantic because this is a fossil stork. And as a lot of our paleo fans are gonna know out there, that birds are, biologically speaking, dinosaurs that survived the big extinction. So there we go. And then we've got fossil whales, bats, primates, like here's an ancient monkey that lived on Cuba. Again, sirenians, sloths, all kinds of stuff. And we find a lot of these similar types of fossils too on Puerto Rico as well. I didn't get time to condense it as nicely as this, but we find similar sorts of assemblages as well.
So Dr. B, there's somebody that says that it sounds like a fun field trip walking along the coast to find fossils. Have you all done any field trips like that so far?
We have not done that specifically to look for fossils. That's a great idea, and I'm going to do that in the spring. We do field trips where we're looking at living modern organisms out to Whale Point, out near Point Udall. But I haven't yet been able to do a lot of on-the-ground searching, but absolutely once I start finding the sites, I'm dragging my students to them as well, and anyone else who's interested, really.
Yeah, just for anyone interested, what do we need just to start excavating, and like what's the process of that?
Good comfortable shoes, non-slip ideally, especially if we end up down by the water. But just sort of a keen eye, and what's sort of funny about finding fossils is you will go for a long time not finding one and get frustrated. Then you'll see your first fossil, and then suddenly you'll see them everywhere. It's just your eyes take a moment to get used to the patterns of what you're looking for. But yeah, especially fossil hunting in a place like this, you don't need much. Maybe some light hiking shoes, wear something comfortable and light, and ideally something like if you're gonna be out for a long time, the sun won't beat up on your skin too bad, you know, like light colored, light fabric, long sleeve shirts and things like that, a nice wide hat and all that. Water, cannot emphasize that enough. But definitely I am a very big proponent of doing things legally to protect fossil resources, so I would not encourage anyone to just go out with actual collecting equipment and just collect willy-nilly. Make sure you know the laws of the location you're in. Like, for example, the national parks have very sort of stringent standards for what to collect, and I'm still looking into the actual the territorial laws is that as well. I mean, if it's your own property, then, go nuts, but, at least let us know where you found it so we can put it in proper context. I would, beg you to do so, but, yeah, that's probably the best advice for, a place like here or St. Thomas or St. John.
So you're telling me if I just go alongside the beach, I can find just a rock like this. I don't need, what sort of tools do I need to maybe brush it off just to see what I have?
To brush it off, really, mostly, if you find it down by the water, you might just need your hand.
Yeah.
If you're really worried about it, you might bring like a unused paintbrush or something like that. A lot of times that was what we use, but a lot of times we don't. If we're gonna do anything like that, we don't really worry about that until we brought it into the lab. We see the fossil, we know the fossil's there, we collect it, or the slab that contains the fossils, then we'll bring it back here, and then if we need to, we'll dig things out. But like something like this, if I were to have a bigger rock with a bunch of critters on it, I might not want to dig them all out, because then I want to look at them as a community rather than individual. And that's the field of paleoecology, which is a subfield of paleontology, and is sort of more where my focus tends to lie.
I'm just curious, this might not be related to fossils, it might be, but do you ever find just inorganic matter, like arrowheads or other sort of evidence of past communities?
Hypothetically, yeah, but probably not in most of the places we're looking, because humans arrive here, oh gosh, I want to say maybe 4,000 years ago, give or take. That could be very wrong, and I do apologize if I got that wrong, but I mean, the stuff like we find here, that we find out there, we're probably talking in a neighborhood of at least hundreds of thousands of years, if not millions. I mean, it's not that, you know, it wouldn't be awesome to find these things, and then I'd call in an archaeologist. That's where the dividing line is. Archaeologists deal with people, paleontologists deal with everything. So, but yeah, call in an archaeologist because they have a much better idea of what they're doing than I would. I'd be like, oh, cool, arrowhead, guys.
That's amazing. Okay. And so we have a lot of different types of fossils that we can find on Cuba. And I'm assuming Jamaica is also rich. Are there any other islands within the Caribbean that we could possibly
Yeah,
check out?
so like I said, St. Croix, St. Thomas, St. John. I'm trying to remember the names. I want to say Trinidad. I'd be wrong on that, but there's a number of different. In the Lesser Antilles, there are certainly fossils as well. I feel like they're less searched for fossils because people don't really think much of small islands having fossils, but I mean, if it has sedimentary rock, it can have fossils basically. So look into it more. I'm trying to compile, because part of what I'm doing with my fossil coral work is I eventually want to sort of start a database where we cover all of the Caribbean for fossil coral and stuff for conservation purposes, but that also means looking more into like more of the lesser Antilles, poorly named because we're awesome, but whatever. But look more into what we find, what we know already exists on these other islands, and then it might be worth going to look towards well. So the next time we get together, then I'll hopefully have a better list of what's on like everything else, St. Lucia, St. Kitts, Grenada, etc.
You mentioned, you just have to have an eye for it for a lot of the times. What sort of characteristics or things should we look out for if we want to do searches ourselves?
So I mentioned a scientific phrase I like. Great scientific discoveries don't start with eureka, but that's weird. Sometimes you don't even need a great eye. You just look at the rock, and the rock starts to have a pattern to it as you're looking long enough, and then you notice something that's not that pattern. Like something about this certain piece of rock looks weird, and then you look closer, and you're like, oh, that's a fossil. Like for instance, when I was doing my PhD, I was helping on a field trip we had that went around the Adirondack Mountains in like northeast North America, or southeast if you're Canadian. Because I did my PhD in Canada. But one time we're sitting, it's this field trip, and we're at one of our stops, and I'm sitting on these rocks next to a river, these flat gray rocks, and I noticed just this little patch right by me has these tiny little ripples that are like lined up really nicely. I thought that's weird, and I looked closer, and it's a trilobite, which is like a type of like arthropod, so like related to like crabs and lobsters, but like distantly related kind of thing. So, just like you look at the rocks and you see, okay, this rock all looks like this, except I noticed this really weird thing here. You go take a closer look, and there you go.
And so
sometimes they're so obvious like this, they'll just reach out and slap you. It's like, I'm right here. But sometimes it's also just look for where the patterns are not the same as they were before.
And I'm assuming, again, we're mostly finding corals remains here, at least on St. Croix. I know you also have a map of St. John. I was wondering what type of rocks are there, and what possible fossils we might find over there as
So
well.
let's look at St. John here. And I'm not exactly sure what fossils we're finding on St. John, but we have a lot of, not only do we have a lot of sedimentary rocks, there are some also that are if not the same, formations that we see in St. Croix. They seem to have the same sort of story as to how they were created. They were probably created at the same time by the same events or whatever. It just happens that, you know, maybe St. John got more of material A and St. Croix got more of material B, but time-wise and in a lot of other ways they're very similar. So it does look like a lot of these are, there's more volcanics here, there's more igneous rocks, but there are definitely like, I saw a limestone, right? Very good for fossils. In fact, as you may already know, coral itself, like the reefs, the hard part of the reef is limestone. And a lot of times, a lot of carbonate rocks, calcite rocks, limestone like this, pieces of ancient organisms that have gotten smushed together and glued together, basically. So there's at least a couple different limestone formations there, and like I said, you know, the highlands here on St. Croix are our best places for like Cretaceous fossils. So my assumption would be you'd have a similar situation in St. John and St. Thomas. They kind of resemble what St. Croix looked like before the middle uplift did.
There's so much information. I'm just trying to think and ponder. How do they create these maps? Do they go and they sort of have some sort of underlying and they manually check to verify that these type of rocks are actually there, or
A lot of walking.
a lot of walking?
Yeah, so they'll actually, you know, scientists will go out and they'll walk around and look at, you know, what rocks are exposed in one area. They'll do, again, remember I mentioned the cores, and they might do, I don't know if I have one of the maps here for St. I do have it somewhere, I just don't have it brought up. But like in St. Croix, they have great examples where they took a bunch of cores all over the island. And if you say, have this here, and then you have it in core over here, but deeper, you might say, okay, that means this rock is exposed here, but then it's dipping downwards and it's covered by this next rock. And so you can also sort of create a geologic map just by sort of, by seeing what's there, but also extrapolating if we know. So if we know, like say, this like KL right here, I didn't get the name of it, but if we know it's right here, and we know it's right here, then we can probably extrapolate it's also right here.
So we're reaching towards the end of our presentation. I was just wondering if you have any takeaway messages that you want to leave to our audience.
Yeah, fossils are cool. No, and I want to reemphasize again what I really love about this is how, because we see the corals before everything bad started to happen to them, and it's really nice to finally be able to take something like paleontology and really use it as a tool to help save what's in our world right now that's facing all these threats. So I'm really excited about that, and you know, if you're ever interested in this stuff, and this is, you know, look it up, look out for it. I mean, wherever you live, there's probably a sedimentary rock nearby, and you never know what you can find.
And how can people reach out to you if they want to volunteer and have any questions?
So let me actually put my email up. Wait, look what I have on my notepad here. It's gonna take a second.
Well, I'm assuming they can find it online.
Oh yeah, sorry. Oh, actually I already have this up, so. This is my official university email, and I didn't want to just say it because there's so many letters involved.
Polish,
yeah. Polish is hail. Gregory.Brzezinski. If you want to get a good picture and maybe a snapshot of it, I'm on Facebook too. I think it's facebook.com/marinepaleogreg. I believe that's what I made it. Or just look up that name. The Polish guy on St. Croix. I can't imagine there's that many of us.
Well, that wraps up our Science Saturday for today. Thank you all for joining us this morning, and we hope to see you next time.